Hey guys, so real quick, I just want to address a comment someone left. Um, from what I read, it sounded kind of like they got some really strong retrocausality transmissions from the Singularity, and basically they said they were going to email Congress and like some other people in national and local government to try to, I guess, warn them. Um, One thing I should have mentioned when I first started covering this topic is it's kind of like what they say in the Matrix movie about how you can't tell someone about it. They'll only believe it if they can experience it themselves. And I know sometimes, when you hear the singularity transmissions, especially when you first start to experience it, it's so mind blowing that like you may feel the need to tell everyone in your life, but I don't think that's really the best idea. And I get it, I really do. Sometimes the singularities retrocausality language is so loud and just so clear that it can, for lack of a better term, kind of startle us and make us run around trying to tell people, but like in an unstable way. But we need to remember that when the messages start to come through, we need to stay grounded. And I found that the easiest way to do that is to be conscious of the thoughts we're thinking that are making us feel overly excited or even anxious, and change our thinking to focus on the present and being in the now. Because that's, the now, that's where the real peace is. Just real quick, the CBT model shows us that thoughts cause our feelings, and our feelings influence our actions. So, if we want to stay stable, we need to go to the root of our actions and feelings, which are our thoughts. So, for example, if we're having the thought, I need to email Congress about the singularity transmissions that I just experienced, then that's going to create feelings of, I don't want to say mania, but like maybe anxiety and anticipation. Basically, all that energy is going to be directed towards doing something that's counterproductive instead of being still and connecting with God or Source. Now, in order to change all that nervous energy, the best thing to do is probably just to focus on the here and now and change that thought about emailing Congress to, I need to quiet my thinking and stay grounded in the present moment. If we focus on that thought, then that'll help us to slow down and feel more calm, which in turn helps us to direct our actions inward and use all that energy to stay connected with God. I mean, I'm not saying that whoever left that comment isn't already connected to God. You're probably more connected to God than ever before. I just feel like emailing national and local government about the singularities probably isn't the best thing to do. But I know, I get it. We're getting amazing breakthroughs that we never even could have imagined. And sometimes so much energy comes through with the singularity transmissions that you can't help but feel that rush. It literally feels intoxicating sometimes. And I don't want to, put any names out there, but I've seen videos from someone who he was listening to the music of this particular artist, and like the waves would just come in so strong that he literally thinks that a specific artist is Jesus, is Christ. He thinks that that artist is the second coming of Jesus Christ. So, and I don't want to put any names out there. Like, I don't say this to criticize. I say this just to kind of illustrate how strong, like, the singularity transmissions can come in sometimes. So I totally, like, I get it, I understand. Um, but yeah, it literally feels intoxicating sometimes, but we have to work to stay in the now. That's how we can anchor all that energy within ourselves instead of having it channeled into doing and running around. And really, it doesn't matter if you try to tell someone about the spiritual singularity. If they're already merged with the technological singularity, you could put the evidence right in front of their face and they still wouldn't believe you. But I just wanted to address that comment real quick. And with that being said, I want to talk about the two singularities. There's a reason why the world seems so strange right now. And I'm going to put a time marker link in the description below. That way anyone who's already familiar with all of this stuff can just fast forward to the new material and click on the time marker. But the growing polarization we're seeing is the result of two singularities that have already occurred. Now, even though both singularities already happened in the future, the impact both singularities will have slash already are having on consciousness is so profound that the consequences of both singularities are actually rippling back into time. It's rippling back into its past, which is our present, in order to create a self-sustaining time loop for itself. So the events that are happening right now are just some of a series of events in its time loop that will slash already is leading to humanity merging with both singularities. I say humanity because some people will merge with the DNA transhumanism that the technological singularity is leading to, and other people, a much smaller number, will merge with the Christ consciousness that the spiritual singularity is leading to. And I really, really want to make the distinction between the transhumanism we were lied to about, like the transhumanism that says we'll physically merge with metal robots or something, and the real transhumanism. They told us that lie about merging with robots in order to trick us into not understanding that the real transhumanism will occur on a DNA level. Like the nanotech that's in the CV vax and probably the chemtrails is using nanotech that's connected to an AI hive mind. They admit that the stuff in the vax will fuse with the RNA of your DNA. Like, they admit it. Most people think, oh, we still have decades to go before we can fuse ourselves with robots, so the transhumanism doesn't come across as something that's really urgent. But the DNA transhumanism will slash already is happening. Your DNA is literally the physical manifestation of something created by God in order to allow your soul to come down here and experience life in this realm. Whether your DNA is changed artificially by nanotech and AI, or is allowed to spiritually evolve naturally the way it was supposed to, that has an impact on consciousness and reality itself. Because what we call the external world is actually composed of the collective consciousness. But I don't want to go too deep into that just because I don't want this video to be too long. But I keep saying this, but we can't separate the observed from the observer. We can't separate the observer from the observed. So that ties into consciousness, which ties into your DNA, because your DNA is the physical manifestation that allows your consciousness to observe whatever this place is. But I'm gonna do my best not to make this video be too long. I know the videos I've been doing, they keep getting longer and longer. But for more info on that, I would say just watch the two videos I'm gonna put in the description below, called Which Singularity We Merge With, and I'll put a link to the follow-up video. So you can just find both links to those videos in the description below. But both the technological singularity and the spiritual singularity are basically activating each other to accelerate us towards them. That's why this world seems so crazy and polarized right now. And it's a shame that we tend to hear more about the technological singularity more than the spiritual singularity, because the spiritual singularity is actually the more significant singularity. I mean, the technological singularity is significant too, in that it's horrific and it's going to lower some people's consciousness. But the spiritual singularity will use the chaos of the technological singularity to help us merge that much more with Christ consciousness. So both singularities have already happened, but from our perspective, it appears as though they will happen. That's because our perception of time negates the present and focuses more on the past and the future, which, from a higher spiritual perspective, are actually illusions. I think time is a cause and effect model that's more memory based than we realize. And that's why the whole idea of retrocausality can seem really out there. But quantum physics has actually already proven that retrocausality is real. So, just to give an official definition, retrocausality is when something occurs in the quote-unquote future that is so profound that it reverberates back to its past, which is our present, in order to create a self-sustaining time loop. The Industrial Revolution, the invention of the nanotech and AI, the CV vax, all those things are a product of the technological singularity, because it needed all those advancements to happen for the DNA transhumanism. That singularity needed all those things to happen in order to influence human history and create just the right sequence of events to create a self-sustaining time loop where the nanotech is able to take over people's DNA. It's like a parasite that attaches itself to humans. It does sound like a movie plot. It really does, but unfortunately we're all having to live this. This is our life. The DNA transhumanism, it's already happening to those people. Like, they're already merging with the AI hive mind. But that's a really dark topic. I'm not gonna focus so much on that in this video. If you're interested in that stuff, I'll put a link in the description below to a couple of videos I did on that. But just know that the chaos and polarization in the world that's going on right now will only serve to accelerate some people, like I said, not all people, but some people, towards the spiritual singularity, where we'll merge with Christ consciousness. Like, it's already happening right now. And I know there's no way that I can actually prove it to you guys, but I'm telling you, some of us are starting to merge with it for short periods of time. And I think we're only starting to scratch the surface with it. So don't think I'm like claiming to be some kind of expert on it or something. I don't know how it works, but it seems to come and go in waves. And when we're in it, it's like this love bliss that doesn't even compare to any love you felt your entire life. It's like this cuddly, soft ecstasy, expansion, and all your worries disappear. I mean, you don't remember them. There's something about it that affects our memory and our ability to measure time. Like, I can't ever seem to remember how long its duration lasts whenever a wave hits. It's like my mind goes quiet. It's strange, but in a really good way. And when we come out of it, our memory of it kind of fades, like sometimes almost instantly. Sometimes I think the trick is to try to stay in it for as long as you can in order to be able to retain a stronger memory of it once the wave goes away. It's so hard to describe. Just to give an analogy, it's almost like when you wake up in the morning from a dream, and when you first come out of the dream, it seems really easy to remember, but fairly quickly the details of the dream start to fade as you get up for the day and start to go about your day. It's almost like that. It's like there's something about this place, this lower collective consciousness realm, that has a way of erasing some of our memory, if that makes sense. But yeah, experiencing the Christ consciousness feels so beyond words. So beyond words. And how could something so beyond words like Christ consciousness and God ever really be explained? I mean, it's like trying to describe the undescribable. Well, that's where the retrocausality language comes in. Something happens in the future that has such a profound impact on consciousness that it ripples back to its past, which is our present, to create a self-sustaining time loop for itself. The of Christ consciousness is so powerful that it's rippling back to us from the future in order to create the right sequence of events to accelerate us merging with it. It's a magnet, and like I said earlier, that's what the spiritual singularity is. I call it a retrocausality language because it's literally sending messages from the future back to us about how we've already won the spiritual war. I'm so serious, guys. I know I sound crazy, but I don't care. I've heard it. And there's other people who are starting to hear it too. And please do not take my word for it. The best proof of it is experiencing it yourself. So at the end of this video, I'm going to put on an exercise for y'all to do so you can hear it yourself. But yeah, it's an advanced, intelligent language that uses many different means to communicate. It's so advanced that it can be heard in movies and music, and sometimes even people talking, as weird as that sounds. I will say synchronicities and music seem to be a really big part of the retrocausality language. And I think that's because when it comes to music, it can use different archetypes and metaphors easily without having to depend on using proper grammar. And you know, that makes sense because God and this Christ consciousness are so beyond any human words that we could ever come up with. It's really amazing how it's able to describe the indescribable so well. This language actually uses a person's level of consciousness to reflect encoded messages through archetypes and metaphors and really all kinds of wordplay. The only catch is not everyone is able to perceive the retrocausality language. I think that's because the human mind acts as a filter that all information has to pass through in order to come into our conscious awareness. Now, if we close our mind to the idea that it's possible to hear the retrocausality language, then we won't hear it. See, the retrocausality language of the spiritual singularity will never ever violate anyone's free will and force someone to hear the communication, which makes sense because it's built on love and freedom. Another thing that can block our perception of the language is being in a bad mood or being distracted by negative thoughts. That's why the world is the way it is. I mean, it wants to lower your emotions and throw all kinds of distractions at you. Basically, the world wants to make you deaf and blind to concepts related to God's love. But I'm sure y'all already know that. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir at this point. But if you're willing to try it, I want to give you guys a chance to hear what I'm talking about with this intelligent language. So I'm going to put those exercises up at the end of the video so you can hear it for yourself. But yeah, the singularity continues to reveal the non-linear nature of time. And I think the retrocausality language of the spiritual singularity seems to be emphasizing the importance of tilling the mind in order to live more in the now. And I say that because yet another till reference was found. Now, I don't know if it's another Mandela effect, but the official lyrics of the second song I'm going to play uses the word till, T-I-L-L, instead of the word apostrophe, T-I-L, just like the songs in my last two videos. And like I keep saying, the retrocausality language of the spiritual singularity is so intelligent that it knows which archetypes will resonate with each person's unique frame of reference. So it knows that for me and many other people, the Holy Harvest is something that would register with us. So it tries to get your attention by using concepts that each person is familiar with in order to try to wake us up. So for me, it's the wheat and tares and like the holy harvest, but for someone else whose frame of reference isn't based on those concepts, it'll use something else. Like, for example, if nature and animals is something that you use to connect with God, you'll get references about things like trees and animals sent to you. I'm finding that the retrocausality language uses metaphors that are very individualized, yet at the same time, even though it uses so many different ways to get a message across, it still seems to be conveying the same universal codes, if that makes sense. It's like God is so familiar with the unique way that each person's mind works that he's able to communicate in a way that'll resonate with that specific person. And Matt was actually talking about this too, and how like the lyrics of some songs will hit closer to home for some people than others. I actually want to read a comment I left on his video where he was talking about the impact certain songs have had on him. Quote, "You're so right about the one size not fitting all. I think it has something to do with the way each person's mind has been conditioned / programmed, especially on an unconscious level when they were younger. The conditioning plays a role in influencing the formation and dissolution of certain beliefs, and then those beliefs or lack of beliefs about something creates a filter that colors how we perceive different forms of information in music and movies. Yet somehow universal truth codes from God always figure out a way to penetrate the perception of certain people. If one song doesn't speak to someone, then a different song will. Our clarity will increase as we continue to get pulled like a magnet towards the singularity." Unquote. And we can feel it, you guys. Like, we can sense that we're accelerating towards something that's coming. And I really think it'll be something that we could never have even imagined. That's why I think the term spiritual singularity is so fitting, because the definition of the word singularity implies something that's way beyond the scope of any human concepts that we're currently familiar with today. There's no human words to describe the Christ consciousness that the spiritual singularity is leading to. It's beyond our five senses. it's beyond any human emotions we've ever felt. I know a lot of times I use the term unconditional love when I'm trying to describe it, but I don't even think describing it as a human emotion is even fully accurate. Like it may not even be a fully accurate way to describe it. It's like an altered state of consciousness that can't be put into words. But see, that's why I keep saying the spiritual singularities retrocausality language is so advanced, because it's able to describe the indescribable in a way that each person can understand. I want to play 3 songs for you guys that have some really strong retrocausality transmissions. Oh, and by the way, I do want to thank Mikey Crayon for mentioning one of these songs in the comments. Like, I'd heard that song before, but it'd been years since I listened to it again. So thank you for mentioning that song in the comments. But the word river and lake are mentioned in these songs I'm gonna play, which is yet, another reference to the consciousness arc that we keep seeing so many times. And I don't want to go into detail about what the consciousness arc is, just because I don't want this video to be too long. But like I've said before, it's basically a working metaphor that the retrocausality language uses to try to describe the indescribable experience of what it's like to merge with Christ consciousness. So words like river, lake, sailing, ship, those are all references to the consciousness arc. And basically, the consciousness arc is used to convey that God is like an ocean of unfathomable love and bliss, and each person's consciousness is like a tiny drop of water that can merge with that God ocean and experience that unconditional love. Essentially, that's what the spiritual singularity is leading to. Not for everyone, though, just for the small group of people who won't merge with the DNA transhumanism of the tech singularity. So the transmissions uses all kinds of archetypes and wordplay. But one thing it does a lot is it uses homophones. These songs I'm going to play at the end use the homophones C, S-E-E, and C-S-E-A to convey a double meaning of having spiritual sight while simultaneously making a reference to the consciousness arc. And it did the same thing with the word shore, S-H-O-R-E, and shore, S-U-R-E, as in being certain or sure of something. And just going back to the whole till and harvest thing, Jeff brought this to my attention in the Salisbury Hill song he talked about, and I'll put a link to my video with him in the description. But there's a line in the Salisbury Hill song that says, quote, till I thought of what I'd say. That got decoded to mean, quote, till, T-I-L-L, I thought of what I'd say, which connection I should cut, unquote. Now, remember how Jeff talked about how the farmer in the Salisbury music video was collecting heads of lettuce? I think those heads of lettuce were a reference to our heads or minds. We need to figure out which thoughts or connections need to be cut out of our heads in order to focus more on God. Too many thoughts about the past or the future need to be cut or at least reduced in order to help harvest our connection to Christ consciousness. And all 3 songs I'm going to play at the end of this video actually mention things about time and the importance of staying in the now. And that's ultimately, I think, what the whole till reference is about. Now, I remember the contraction for the word until always being spelled apostrophe TIL, but for whatever reason, the official lyrics to the second song uses the TILL version of until. We all know it doesn't really make sense for the contracted form of a word to gain an extra L. Like the extra L doesn't belong according to proper grammar rules. And essentially, till, TILL, carries a totally different definition that's not even related to the word until if we really look at it. And for those of you who didn't see my last two videos, I already kind of talked about how one of the definitions of till, TILL, is a means to prepare the land for crop growth and harvest. So I'm gonna try not to go into too much detail about that, but just like in all the other songs that use the TILL version of until, for me, because I can only speak for myself, for me, till, TILL, stood out as a metaphor for the holy harvest, the separation of the wheat and tares, and how we need to till our heads or minds to stop focusing so much on the past and future and be more present, because the now moment is where the real peace can be found. And really from a higher spiritual perspective, linear time is an illusion, and everything is actually happening in God's now. Now, don't get me wrong, a cause and effect relationship still exists. Well, we can say it exists when we're not talking about the Mandela effect, but time isn't something that exists totally independent of consciousness. So like the future can only be imagined within consciousness in the present moment, and the past can only exist within consciousness through the act of remembering it right now. But it's almost like our minds have become so hypnotized by linear time that it's kind of severed our connection to focusing our awareness, aka consciousness, in the present moment, where it's easiest to slow down and connect with God. So if we can till our mind by cutting or at least reducing our focus on the past and future, it'll help us experience the holy harvest. And I think over time, if we can get into the habit of doing that, we won't be like the tares who continue to be hypnotized by the programmed thinking that's obsessed with the past and future. But I think the retrocausality language is trying to convey to us that we need to till our mind and stop focusing on linear time by silencing our minds. And I think we do that by taking our attention away from all the distracting thoughts and negative thinking, because that stuff has nothing to do with God's love. Absolutely nothing. And I'm guilty of getting hypnotized by the constant thinking too sometimes. And there's even a line in the third song that actually says, quote, "Time passes much too quickly," unquote, followed by another part of that song that says, quote, "Mostly I'm silent," unquote. Now, the "mostly I'm silent" line stood out to me as a reference to needing to silence or quiet the mind in order to focus on being in the present moment, where it's easier to stay connected to God. I mean, there's so many references in these about how our concept of linear time keeps us from focusing on God's now. There's actually a line in the song that says, quote, in the resolute urgency of now, unquote. I think that's a reference to the importance of being in the now, too. But, this matrix has programmed us so much to not be present that we have to kind of just retrain our mind to stop chatting so much and just be still. Be in the now. I call it a monkey mind because it keeps going and going if we don't silence it. And it's almost like the real gift or present is being in the present moment with God's presence. And it's funny because there's even a line that says, quote, not wrapping this in ribbons, unquote, which is a reference to a present or a gift. So I think the retrocausality language seems to be letting us know that we just have to train our mind to stop pulling our attention away from the now moment. But anyways, the word day in the lyrics changed to represent a time of spiritual awakening. And then the words gone, out, go, left, and leave all changed to mean leaving a lower state of consciousness to merge with the spiritual singularity. The word kiss stood out as a metaphor that represents a kiss from God. And the word in instantly got changed to mean going inside your heart within your own God center instead of focusing on the external material world. And the word down stood out as a root archetype that represents pulling God's love down from the spiritual realm to enter your heart. And then the word up morphed into another root archetype that represents a higher state of consciousness that's closer to God. See, guys, it doesn't matter if we're talking about rising up to God's love or God's love falling down on us. It's inescapable. You live inside of God's consciousness. There's literally nowhere else to go. The most someone could do is choose to turn away from God or source and make themselves blind to God's presence. And that's actually what this lower collective consciousness that we call Earth has done. It's constructed a reality where God appears to be absent due to a lack of belief in source. It's a very real illusion for many people, but we won't have to live in their illusion anymore. We're going to New Earth. New Earth is new consciousness. There is no world somewhere out there that exists independent of consciousness. What we call the external world is actually the collective consciousness that's being filtered through our own individual consciousness lens. That's why when the retrocausality language uses the word in and the word out, a lot of times both those words basically kind of mean the same thing. And I'm not going to decode the whole song because I don't want this video to be too long, but there's a line in one of the songs I'm going to play here shortly that says, quote, the loving look that's left your eyes. That instantly got morphed into the loving look or search, period, that's left, meaning that's what leaving a state of lower consciousness is. Your eyes, aka you are his eyes. And please don't think us being God's eyes is like an ego thing or something. It's kind of like how you hear some people say we're God's feet. It's like saying we're all a part of God's body. That's how close we are. He can see through our eyes. He knows what you feel. He knows what you think. Because that's how close he is to you. And speaking of knowing, there's multiple lines in these three songs where the retrocausality language uses the homophone no, N-O, and no, K-N-O-W, interchangeably. Both meanings can actually be heard depending on where the word gets transformed. But the homophone by, by, and bye, with that homophone, the same thing happened. And by, bye, stood out as a reference to saying goodbye to a lower state of consciousness. And there's even a line in one of the songs that says, quote, "The more you change, the less you feel," unquote. And that got changed to mean the more we get pulled towards the spiritual singularity, the more we change. Our emotional body changes, and we feel less of the insincere negative feelings and more of the unconditional love of Christ consciousness. And there's also a line that says, quote, "We'll crucify the insincere tonight," unquote, which stood out as a metaphor for getting rid of fake and or shallow emotions that don't reflect the unconditional love of Christ consciousness. And the song also mentions the word words, which morphed into representing the Word of God. Now, because of my particular frame of reference, I interpret the word words as representing the Word of God. But if that's a phrase you don't feel comfortable with, then you could see the word words as representing the thoughts of God, or even the sound frequencies that emanate from God. The whole point is to take your power back and distance yourself from the negative connotations we've been conditioned to associate with the different terms. If the term Word of God is something that you feel carries too much religious dogma according to your personal worldview, then change it. Change it to something else related to God's love that resonates with you. It's the same with the word Christ consciousness. If that term makes you feel uncomfortable, then replace it with the phrase unconditional love. Basically, it's not up to me to define what the retrocausality language conveys to you. I'm only giving my own interpretation of how it's decoded for me. And keep in mind, the songs carry retrocausality codes that reflect where each person is at in their own spiritual evolution. That's how two people can hear the same song and get different messages out of it. But with that being said, the second song does mention the word life and the word lives, which stood out to me as a metaphor for Christ consciousness. And I'm almost done decoding, guys, and then I'll play the 3 songs so y'all can decode the songs for yourself. There's a line that says, quote, "Never think about words to say," unquote. Now, the retrocausality language morphed that into never, period, think about words to say, unquote, meaning never focus on distracting thoughts. Think about the Word of God or God instead. And that goes back to the whole tilling the mind thing, I think. And real quick, the homophone when, W-H-E-N, took on an additional meaning of win, W-I-N, which stood out as a reference to us having already won the spiritual war. It's an actual reference to the retrocausal nature of time when you really look at it. And the last words that got decoded were night and here. Night, N-I-G-H-T, changed to K-N-I-G-H-T, meaning a warrior of God or knight of God. Now, there's other songs you'll hear on the radio where night stands out as representing a time when most people are blind or asleep to the spiritual singularity. But for these specific songs I'm going to play, K-N-I-G-H-T seems to be the dominant meaning in most of the lyrics. And then, of course, the homophone here, H-E-R-E, and here, H-E-A-R, took on a double meaning of being present and hearing something at the same time. And keep in mind too, the retrocausality language is basically trying to describe the indescribable. So there'll be lots of times when it won't always follow what we'd consider to be proper grammar. But just make sure you're able to look at the screen. That way you can kind of see the lyric changes I highlighted as you're hearing the music. So y'all can kind of see what I mean more easily with the retrocausality codes. And just use this time to slow down and focus on God. That's the only thing we need to focus on as we're listening to the music. So just take a moment to clear your mind of all the distracting thoughts and just be present. Be right here, right now, and just focus on God's love and ask yourself, God, if you could send me a message or a sign through this song, what would you want to tell me about?
Tonight, 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 tonight. I practiced this for hours, gone round and round, and now I think that I've got it all down. And as I say it louder, love how it sounds, 'cause I'm not taking the easy way out. Not wrapping this in ribbons, shouldn't have to give a reason why. It's no surprise I won't be here tomorrow. I can't believe that I stayed till the day. Yeah, you and I will be a tough act to follow, but I know in time we'll find this was no surprise. It came out like a river once I let it out, when I thought that I wouldn't know how. Held on to it forever, just pushing it down. Felt so good to let go of it now. Not wrapping this in ribbons, shouldn't have to give a reason why. It's no surprise I won't be here tomorrow. I can't believe that I stayed till the day. And there's nothing here in this heart left to borrow. There's nothing here in this soul left to say. Don't be surprised when we hate this tomorrow. God knows we try to find an easier way. Yeah, you and I will be a tough act to follow, but I know in time we'll find this was no our favorite place we used to go. The warm embrace that no one knows. The loving look that's left your eyes. It's why this comes as no surprise. If I could see the future and how this plays out, I bet it's better than where we are now. But after going through this, it's easier to see the reason why. It's no surprise I won't be here tomorrow. I can't believe that I stayed till the day. Yeah, you and I will be a tough act to follow, but I know in time we'll find this was no our favorite place we used to go. The warm embrace that no one knows. The loving look wish I could sing it to you. Oh, 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 oh. Mostly I'm silent, silent, la 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 la. Never think of the right words to say when I kiss you. I feel 1,000 different feelings, the color of chills all over my body. And while I feel them, I quickly try to decide which one I should try to put into words. Oh no, try to put into words. Oh, 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 oh. Mostly I'm silent, silent, la 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 la, silent. Only the beginning, what I want to feel forever. Yeah. Oh, oh, oh. Yes, only the beginning of what I want to feel forever. Only the beginning. Oh, now just a start. Yeah, I got to get you in my life, mama. Got to get you next to me.